Welcome to Bigfoot Crossroads podcast. I'm your host, Matt Knapp, joined with my other host, Jonathan Brown. Jonathan, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Doing all right. Feeling a little under the weather, but trying to hang in there. If I start hacking and wheezing, just take over.
Gotcha.
We got our good buddies, the Outlaws, Bear and Coonbo, returning for a little question and answer session tonight. How you doing, fellas?
Wonderful.
We here.
You here?
We here.
You here?
Yeah.
I want to say, first of all, and this goes to you guys too for, helping us kick off the show and everything. I'd like to thank everybody. We have officially gone over 500 subs. We have over 500 subscribers already. And,
cool.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Does that mean we get a pay increase?
Yeah, you get twice as much as what you were getting.
Oh, okay.
Well, let's just kind of jump into this. I can tell you the number one question that got asked. And
okay.
I think everybody asked that. They want to know exactly how far a yonder is.
It's about, isn't a yonder about 3 apiece, Bear? It's down the road a piece.
It's over yonder, so it's got to be 3 apiece at Times Square point what?
I don't know.
What's times pi, isn't it?
Yeah,
and
pie.
that's apple pie, right?
Right. Whatever time the pie is going to be done.
Exactly.
No, but,
sometimes
I'm going to let Jonathan ask the first question. John, you did get the questions, right?
Yeah.
And the reason I'm doing this is because Jonathan's wife, Sarah, had her hand up the longest in class out of everybody, just dying to ask this question. She's been trying to ask it all day, so I'm going to turn it over to him and let him shoot it at you.
Okay, so I'm reading these in order, and the first one is from Sarah. And have you heard Sasquatches making a rhythmic tapping on trees? Not tree knocking, but tapping.
I don't know if I've heard them tapping on trees, but I've heard them clicking rocks together rhythmically, like, anywhere from 3 to 5 clicks of a rock at a cadence of about a click every 2 to 5 seconds. And, whatever cadence they establish, they stick with it. They're like a good drummer. They keep the time pretty good. And yeah, I've heard them do that. It's like I said, generally rocks. Now, I got followed down in Alabama one time. I think I was fishing with Bubba Gump. I believe it was Bubba Gump and I might have been. We were down there fishing. Anyway, I was down there fishing with somebody, and in a particular lake that's way out in the middle of nowhere by itself. We were the only people at the boat ramp that morning. We launched before daylight at around 4 a.m. and something stayed up on the ridge, mostly to the east of us, and followed us. And about every minute or so, would hit a tree with something. Would do a single tree knock, and then about every 3rd or 4th knock, there would be an answering knock from way off in the distance to the west. And this went on from 4:30 in the morning or 4:35 in the morning, definitely before daylight, until about 10:30 in the morning when we finally left. And it followed us as we moved around in the lake fishing. We never did crank up the big motor. We just used the trolling motor. But it was pretty unnerving. And I know we strained our eyeballs till they were hanging out on stems trying to see the dadgum thing, never did do it.
Yeah, I bet. Man, 6 hours, that's a long time.
Yeah. Now, I investigated a deal up in Tennessee, south of Nashville, near Bear, what's that fancy neighborhood up there? Franklin, Tennessee?
Yep.
And near that, I can't remember that mall, but anyway, this is a little bit south of there and east of the interstate, and back in there where they sell a lot of ranchettes, 5 to 10 acre pieces of land with big old yuppie box houses on them, and there was some people that had a piece of property that backed up to a mountain that had. This is no surprise to us, but there was a big old abandoned rock quarry up in that mountain. And they had been down there, had started to chop down a tree in their yard with an axe. And they heard answering knocks back up in the woods towards that old quarry and didn't really pay attention to it. And after a little bit, back behind their house, they had a pasture with some horses in it, and the horses started going crazy and acting up. And they walked around the house to see what was scaring what was the matter with those horses. And there was a booger standing there in the tree line at the corner of the pasture, looking at them. And,
wow.
Yeah.
Now, I've never heard the rhythmic tapping before, just tree knocks and rock clacking. What about you, Bear? Do they do that in Mississippi?
Well, the deal in Mississippi, especially the part, I'm from north central Mississippi, and we don't have the rocks or the limestone or the marble or anything around there like a mountainous terrain does. So mainly what I've dealt with over the years have been actual tree knocks. And, of course, being out in the country, and especially on weekends, you got people working on their fence lines. I mean, barbed wire fence to keep the cattle and the horses in. And you get occasionally people hammering. And even now, modern times, people, when they chopping their wood, they'll use an axe or more so than they will a chainsaw at times. And, we got those wood splitters now, so people don't have to split the wood like they used to. I've noticed over the years, though, at certain times of the day, in isolated locations where I knew there was absolutely nobody living there, being generally knowing the area like I do, no humans lived in those areas or nothing, I would occasionally hear 3 knocks, and they did have a rhythm to it. And it would always be, I've tried to duplicate it several times, and I think I found out how they do it. They would use a hardwood type wood, not an evergreen. Pine or cedar wood does not work in trying to produce a knock. It's always something like a hardwood type wood. And basically, they would use hardwood type trees to hit it with, because you can make a sharp crack. And the best way I could describe it is when professional baseball using a hardwood bat hitting a baseball solid, and it'll make that sharp crack sound, and what they would do, what I would always hear, it would be a sequence or a rhythm. And as Tim stated earlier, I've never heard in wood knocking the sequence go over 3 knocks. One time, me and Dan Rickey and Vicky Fulgrim, 2 other outlaws of ours, they come to Mississippi once with me, and we hit a location that I knew had boogers in it, and we caught them on a Sunday night. And Sunday nights, when everybody's not out on the weekend or things like this, we was investigating in this very isolated location, and something had, it sounded like a stick or a hardwood, and they was hitting on the side of a cattle feeder trough. And what they was doing, they was hitting in a 5-knock sequence. It would never go over 5 knocks. And I've scratched my head about that over the years, and then I scratched my head over the years about the 3-knock system. I figured out basically that if they knock 3 times on the ceiling, if you want me. No, I'm just getting into my blues here. But really, 3 knocks means, hello, are you there? And I tell you why I come to this conclusion. I know that when they go down every morning, because they do walk around during the day. Guys, don't get me wrong. I'm talking about the middle of Mississippi during the daytime, which is more populated, the whole 9 yards, compared to other places that are more isolated, like state parks or national forest or mountainous regions, things like that. But mainly in Mississippi, they are more nocturnal in their movement, or in other places of less populations. In my location, we would hear 3 knocks, sometimes about 10 in the morning, and then we'd hear 3 knocks late that evening just before the sun goes down, dusk dark. And every time we'd hear these 3 knocks from another location, I would hear a reply with either 1 knock or 2 knocks. It
That's
never
right.
varied. It
That's
would
right.
not. It would not be 3 knocks in answer. It'd either be 1 knock or 2 knocks. And what's so cool about that is, after you would hear, if you hear 2 knocks, then from the original location, you'll hear a single knock in response.
Yep.
But if you hear in that isolated location from that original knock 1 knock, you would hear in reply from the original location 2 knocks. It was like a primitive Morse code, really.
But
And go ahead.
You realize, of course, that some people are going to hear this and just be like, oh, come on now. Because and I'm not disagreeing with you. I've experienced it with you guys, without you guys. My findings were dead on exactly the same. The only other thing that I'd add is the single knock that you'll hear upon a human entering an area or exiting an area.
Right.
But we're talking about a very primitive ability to count.
Yeah.
And recognize
not hard at all.
a particular amount, of knocks, and that kind of gives you a beginning glimpse into the intelligence level that they got.
Well,
yep.
Speaking of that, Bear and I have often said that we didn't think that they could count over 5, because neither one of us have ever heard them do more than 5 knocks or taps or anything like that in a series.
Never. And
Never.
And the deal with that is, which I can get into a mini novel anyway, but what I've determined is the reason we hear this, and especially me in my location, at 10 in the morning, here's the scenario I'm envisioning. You separate certain sentinel type Bigfoot or boogers to be in a systematic position, with the family unit being in the center of it. And what I'm saying is, you've got lookouts, but we've called them sentinels. We've called them sentinels for years. And I've told this to you, Matt. I've told this to Coonbo. It's bore fruit in more ways than one. You both know this. I think what it is once they have determined where they're going to bed down for the day, and once they have positioned their lookouts or sentinels in strategic places around the perimeter, with the central area being the core center where the very young, the very old, the alphas, and the females stay. These sentinel types are on station. And I think this is their form of like walkie-talkies with us or telephones or whatever way of communicating to see if they're still on alert. I mean, because you'll hear the first sequence is normally 3 knocks. That's like, hello, are you there? Then you'll hear a repeat knock in reply, either 1 or 2 knocks. And sometimes, if you're lucky enough, you can not only hear a reply from one location, you can hear it from a third location. And it's always systematically in a kind of triangle type formation. And I'm not talking rectangle. I'm not talking a square. It's more like a triangular type formation. And you'll hear the 3 knocks, which is, hello, are you there? You'll hear a reply from a general location, strategically from that location. Then other times you'll hear 2 replies. And it never fails that it's like, are you on alert? Yes, I am, when they get the answer. Then they reply back, acknowledged, or 10-4, whatever. Same thing happens just before they're getting restless in the evening after laying up in that location for a long period of time. They start trying to reassure each other, hey, are you ready? Is everything clear? Because I think this is what's going on. Because who knows what invades not the central core area during the course of a day, but what invades it inadvertently or unknowingly during the course of a day. And would this entail another signal from, say, one of these outlying posts that is picked up by the core unit? Does what I just said make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it definitely does.
You know, another thing too is I've heard them. Well, we all have. Once they're set up in their sentinel positions during the day, they won't necessarily use a knock to warn the rest of the troop that something's going on in their area. A lot of times they'll use some kind of a whistle or a modified bird call.
And it's a very sharp whistle, is it not, Tim?
Right, it is. Very sharp whistle. It carries very well. But
hey, stop right there. That we're going to be satisfying another question.
Well, we can't kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Yeah.
Okay.
I asked that question and let's keep rolling, Timbo.
All right, let's just go ahead and ask that one.
Let me. But a lot of times when you hear that sharp whistle, off in the distance, it'll be answered by a knock.
Yep.
Or 2 rocks clacking together loudly.
Uh-huh. And that question was from Chris Spencer.
Right. But now, let me tell you this. One of the spookiest noises I have ever heard out in the boonies was out in New Mexico in the edge of the Mescalero Apache Reservation up in a canyon where I knew that the boogers were up there. We had very large rocks thrown at us. I'm talking about everything from cantaloupe to small watermelon-sized rocks chunked down at us. You know, they could have hit us if they wanted to, but they didn't. But anyway, that night we were there, and up in the woods and up in the canyon, we heard that click, 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 click. And that went on for an hour up in there, hour and a half. And it moved around. And that was creepy as hell. And I don't know what they were trying to do.
I wonder if you got too close, Tim, and they just, that was their only way of doing it, you know?
But did it sound like the clicking was at was it similar to like rocks being banged together?
Yeah, it sounded like rocks being not banged together loudly. It was just sort of tapped together.
Uh-huh.
It was it was not done real loudly, and it sounded like it wasn't any further than about 30 yards back up into the woods. In fact, sort of light clicking.
That's what I was going to say earlier when I was bringing up the deal about Dan, Ricky, and Vicky Fulton coming to my location on that Sunday night. I guarantee you that booger wasn't 50 yards from us when we heard that rhythmic hitting on the middle of that cattle trough. I knew where the cattle trough was because, you know, this was familiar territory to me. Of course, Dan and Vicky didn't know what they was hitting on. I knew what they was hitting on because it was metallic, and that was the only thing in that area that was metallic, and it was coming from that general direction. And I think we had gotten too close to them, or they came upon us too close, and with me doing calls to try to lure them in, they couldn't. When they get close to you after a certain point in time, they don't call anymore or vocalize anymore. What they start doing is communicating with each other with little bitty taps or clicks. And sometimes these clicks are actually done, I think, with their mouth, like you're clucking to a horse, you know, like, yeah.
Or clicking their teeth, popping their teeth together. It could also be that.
Yep. And I think when they get within a certain range and they're close to you, because you know, like I know, Coonbo, that when they start throwing boulders into the river or into the lake or whatever, they're trying to get your attention and they're trying to get it quick. And 9 times out of 10, when they throw the larger the boulder to make the larger splash or whatever, you're too dang close to them. You know what I mean?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to kind of segue into another question. I think I actually, Jonathan has these questions, but I remember seeing it, so I'm going to steal it. What are some of the dangers or difficulties researchers face that are out there tree knocking and doing calls, trying to get responses where they don't really know what they're doing?
You want to jump in?
That was from Thane Mathis.
All right.
Well, I have heard of, if you look at reports, read a lot of reports. There are a tremendous amount of not so great encounters that are caused by people out there. In a common thread, they're like chopping wood, or they're building a campfire, or they're beating on their tractor, or, you know, working on their car or something like that. They are making a knocking noise of some variety, and they don't realize it. And the local alpha in the area, you know, he's wondering, who the hell is that? You know, who the hell is this invading my space? And so it gets his attention, and if it keeps going on for very long, he doesn't like it, and he pays them a visit and lets them know he doesn't like it. I know a farmer up here in Missouri that I know. He was out working on his tractor one night, and his planter, he had one of those John Deere planters that's one of the new ones that's got the vacuum system in it where it sucks the seeds down out of the bin, or blows them out of the bin. I'm not sure exactly how it worked. Anyway, it got clogged up, and he was out there beating on it trying to get it unclogged. Next thing he knows, he's about 50 yards from a little old creek that passes through there, and all of a sudden something comes up out of the creek and, you know, to the edge of the woods and screams at him. And of course, you know, modern combines got enough lights to light up an airfield, and he looked up and he saw the damn thing standing out there, and he jumped in his combine and fired that. Well, it was already running. He threw that thing in gear, ran out in the middle of the field about a quarter mile away, and it's not his combine, his planter. He ran his tractor out in the field and stopped, and got back out and started working on his planter again. And he said the damn thing stood there screaming at him the whole time he was working on it. And so that's one of the dangers that you get into is you draw attention that you don't want to draw.
One night we was out there in a little country where I was brought up, raised in. There people do everything at the last minute. And it was going to be something like Mother's Day on that Sunday and at the church, and they was going to have a on-the-grounds picnic, the whole 9 yards. They decided about noon the Saturday before that we need to build a new porch over the entranceway into the church. Well, my grandfather volunteered me to help them that night. And we started, once all the material was gathered together and everything, probably about 3 o'clock that afternoon. Well, at 11:30 that night, it still was not completed. Everybody had enthusiastically jumped onto the project as long as it was daylight, but the numbers started dropping off about 8 o'clock that evening. And it was me and 2 other gentlemen. I was the youngest of the bunch, and we was working on that porch atrium to go into the church at 11 o'clock at night. And we had almost had it finished. All we was doing then was, I think they was trying to put the shingles on it. And I was on the ground handling the shingles up. I think I was all of 14 years old at the time. I wasn't driving my own vehicle then because one of the men had to take me home. And, here we was out there, and you got to understand this church probably ain't 2 miles from my granddaddy's land. Actually, you could stand in the parking lot of the church, look to the west, and see the top of the hill where our property was. And you already know through my other stories that we had boogers on our property. About 11:30 that night, I was on the ground. We had halogen or light, or I call them booger lights. One was over near the cemetery, which was right directly across the dirt gravel road from the church, and one was in the parking lot. And they had a big light up above this entranceway, in case of they have church at night and they leave it on. And that was the light everybody was using to nail these shingles into place. Well, if anybody knows anything about shingles, you ain't got to beat on them too much. What you do, you just hand them up there and you raise the flap up, and then you hit it once, 2 or 3 licks, maybe sometime 4 licks. And being that there was 2 men up there on this little bitty porch overhang, and I was hanging the pieces up to them using a ladder, it was kind of slow going, but we was almost finished. But they was hitting in a rhythm 3 knocks. Well, about 11:30 that night, something across the road on the eastern perimeter of the cemetery started looting. It was heading up there to the church, and it caught our attention. And it was doing what we call a bonnet bird type call. It was going. Always do it in a series of 3s. I already knew what it was because of my previous understanding what these things was. But I was watching the 2 guys on the roof, and you ought to have seen them. They both looked at each other, and one of them said, "And get this, mind you, here they are putting shingles on the church." One of them looks at the other and said, "What the hell is that?" And my granddaddy always told me, don't stick your foot in your mouth, just see what everybody else is thinking. And the other guy looks at it and said, "I don't know, but I've heard a lot of people, a lot of these old timers around here say that's a panther screaming." Well, I'm sitting up there saying, well, if that's a damn scream, how come it's whistling? And because it was loud. And the sucker was coming along the perimeter of that fence towards that light out there in the corner of that cemetery. And I look up, and all I see is 2 red eyes looking at us from about 9-10 foot up in the air. And one of the other gentlemen, he saw it from the top of that roof, and he said, damn, look at those eyes, you know. And I'm still sitting here, 14 years old. These two men are on top of a church porch cussing. And, you know, something ain't right about this. And I done seen the eyes, and one of the guys sees the eyes. The other one couldn't from the angle because he was at the other side of the porch. And he said, what eyes are you talking about? And they was looking at them, and I was looking at them from the ground. And about that time, you know, all them dang, the hair stood up on the back of my neck. I said, look, guys, y'all going to either have to move over and I'm coming up there with you, or we just better hurry up and finish this thing out. But it stood there and watched us for about an hour until we completed what we was doing. And when the guys come down from the roof, that's when that sucker just receded off into the distance. But that happened as a direct result of somebody hammering at 11:30 at night in the middle of nowhere, because the church is in the middle of nowhere. Now, getting back to the original question, I'll even go so far as saying, if people start sound blasting calls off into the distance and they don't know what they're sound blasting, all they're doing is either asking for a world of trouble or they ain't going to get no answer at all. Because if you don't know what the calls are, if you don't know what the sequence is, if you don't know what you're doing to begin with, you're either not going to get a response or you're going to get more than you want.
Good advice. I've got a question from Chris from Mason, Michigan. I think this is a good question for you guys, since both of you grew up in situations where these creatures were around your property all the time. Have you seen the same creature more than once, and do you think they recognized you?
I'll start that one off. Down in Mississippi, I saw the same one multiple times, and I know that one recognized me after a while. And the one and I'll say that the one at our farm probably recognized me the second time he saw me, because he had, I guess that would have been the third time he saw me, is when he showed up there at the house and screamed at me out in the yard. But he had caught me back on the back of the farm and screamed at me, and then the next night he showed up there out in the yard and walked around the house. I didn't look out and see him, but I saw his shadow going across across my windows, and my dog was growling at him and such, and then almost exactly a year later is the first time I ever had my first really good visual encounter as an adult, and it was I'm pretty sure the same booger. At least he was the same height anyway. And that one has been seen at other times out there as well. But and then down in Mississippi, the Alpha, there at the first place I lived, I saw that dude multiple times, and I believe it knew me. Yeah. And I know that the ones knew me at the second place I lived down there, because I didn't ever see them very much, but they were hanging around out there all the time. And every evening when I'd get home from work, as soon as I'd get out of the truck, there'd be a whistle off in the woods straight behind my house, and there'd be an answering knock from down in the swamp across the road northwest of my house. And then every morning when I would come out getting ready to go to work, there'd be a whistle and an answering knock somewhere. That went on every single day, day in and day out. And the whole time
How long was that going on for?
Oh, I lived there for, I don't know, about a year, I'd guess, a year or so, before I moved up here to Missouri. And and I know that this one particular location where we've researched a whole lot around this certain set of Indian mounds, we've been in there so many times that I know that the boogers got to know me in there. Absolutely, positively.
Well, I don't remember if it was the last time you guys were there or the time before, but y'all kind of decided that it was the same sentinel out there, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about you, Bear? You got any booger buddies?
Oh, yeah. There ain't no doubt about mine. The one, I don't know without going into the details. I've told it on various blog talk radio shows about the incident where the one come across the pasture. I think I even told it to you guys. The one that loped towards me and my brother and my sister and all that. I actually believe almost 100% that he is the current alpha on the property right now. He's getting old. I'm not expecting him to be the alpha probably even the next time I go up there. I mean, this guy he's getting pretty long in the tooth. His hair is all turning whitening out, and I know his days are numbered. But I think that one that wanted to probably catch fireflies or lightning bugs with us is probably today's alpha on the property. For years and years and years, even after that incident, this thing, I believe he was the one that would mimic my grandmother's snoring and be outside me and my brother's bedroom window. He was probably the same one that even started calling me and my brother and sister in to eat every evening. I know that he was probably the one that mimicked my grandfather's cattle call, and they did this probably up until about 9 years ago. He would, when I go hunting up there, even to this day, him or two or three others will pace me up the hill to my coveted deer stand that I always hunt out of. The stand's been good to me over the years. Also, it's probably been good to the boogers too, because when they hear me shoot, that's like a dinner bell. They know that I'm going to field dress it right there. They also know I'm going to leave the heart, the liver, and the lungs and all on a stump or a leaned over tree right there. Don't necessarily mean that they collect it, but whatever it does, it makes me feel good knowing that I'm leaving something for them. Actually, I don't have many of my game like a deer. If I shoot it, I can find it. But if anybody else hunts that stand, and especially now since I live in Alabama and been in Oklahoma over the last 5 or 6 years, I hadn't been able to hunt it like I used to, but other people in the deer lease know about it, and they also know that when I'm not around, they're welcome to use it. But them are the ones that end up losing deer. They'll shoot him, and they'll follow the blood trail, and then all of a sudden the blood trail just quits. And they say, darn it, how come you the only one that can collect what you shoot up there and we can't? You know, they kind of make a joke out of it, but I'm just sitting there knowing it's easier not to say nothing than to start something that they all going to just laugh about. But when we would have outings on my property, and I think Coonbo remembers this, the one that always comes in there, he always, Coonbo calls him the 400-pound tree frog.
800-pound tree frog.
Well, I'm not going to insult him and piss him off at you, so I'm going to be nice and call him 4. But that was the one that always would come down that hill, and I tell you why he would always come down that hill. As long as I'm driving the same vehicle that he can recognize the pitch of the motor of my vehicle, that's how acute their hearing these guys have. They can identify my truck even over a lengthy period of time or a long absence from there. But they also listen to how many doors shut when I get out of the vehicle. If it's always just one door slamming shut, and I do this on purpose there at my property. Whenever we go out as a group somewhere to a strange territory, I ask everybody to respectfully just close their doors as silently as they can. But on my property, I've never asked nobody to do that, and it's because I knew that the boogers up there would recognize my car, but they are my truck, and then they would recognize if 2 doors or 3 shut or slammed shut, that I'm not there by my lonesome, that I'm going to end up having somebody else with me, you know. And that's been a lot of fun. Now, the one that charged me in that cane honeysuckle thicket in another location in the same county, same deal with that rascal. Ever since he got the bluff over on me and scared the hell out of me when I come up on him while he was asleep in that thicket, that rascal will find me if I'm hunting in that location and do his damnedest to torment the hell out of me, because he surprised me the first time. Second time, he hasn't surprised me since. Actually, we kind of have a general understanding between us two that, you know, you caught me with my britches down once, but you ain't going to catch me with them down twice. And it's like he'll come up there to where I'm at once he recognizes that I'm by myself hunting or something. He'll come up there and he'll start screwing with me a little bit. He'll start huffing and coughing over there off to the side, and I'll just look over there and just start grinning. And it's like it pisses him off to a certain degree, but then he recognizes, well, hell, he ain't no fun no more because I ain't scared the hell out of him.
I think what you were just sharing, Bear, I think that lines up with one of these questions here, and this is, again, from Sane Mathis, and it was, in one of your accounts, a large alpha male ran after Bear as you, Coonbo, were driving away from the and the alpha took a swipe at Bear. However, none of the video footage of this turned out. Also, other times you have filmed these things and the video did not come out. Coonbo, do you believe there is something about the energy field these things emit, like infrasound, that can affect the functioning of electronics? And what do you know about the physics of electricity that might explain this?
Well, I used to didn't believe this at all. And we got another outlaw by the name of Michael Stuckey, and that does a lot of filming and recording. And anyway, he came down to Mississippi and stayed with me for about a week, and we were going out every evening, you know, with night vision and you know, a lot of recorders and stuff. I mean, he's got good stuff. I mean, he ain't got no junk. It's all, you know, the latest digital stuff, and at least what that he had then. Anyway, we went out to this one location, and I called the boogers up, and they came in close, and he was recording and was trying to get some video, and the dadgum stuff died. Well, I got pissed off at him. I'll be perfectly honest, and I got pissed off at him, and I thought that he hadn't, because I had asked him before we went out, you got fresh batteries in it? You got good batteries? Oh yeah, everything's charged up. I got new batteries and other stuff, you know. Well, here we get out there, and as soon as the boogers get in there close, everything dies. And man, I got hot. And so the next day, before we went out, I went to Walmart, and when we got home that night, I made sure myself personally that all of his stuff got plugged in, that was rechargeable. And then I went to Walmart the next day and I bought brand new batteries, brand new fresh batteries. I dug through there and got the freshest batteries I could. And when we got back home and started, and before we went out, I personally put fresh batteries in everything that used regular batteries. Well, first thing that happened right there by the house where we hear one calling. Actually, we heard an owl call and we heard a booger answer it. And I thought, okay, let's step out here and let's listen to this. And so heard it again, and then so I answered. I called back. Well, the next time the booger called, he was a lot closer. And we called him up, and he was right behind an old tractor shed that was sort of diagonal across the road from my house. And we could see him peeking around the end of the tractor shed. And when he would pull back, we would ease up closer. Well, as we got up pretty close to it, I'm holding one of the recorders, and all of a sudden I look down, and the son of a gun dies right when I'm looking at it. And I absolutely could not believe it. And then here, so I had to apologize to Michael, for acting like a rear end to him, because I had accused him of not having good batteries, not having his stuff charged up. But every time when we would get real close to the boogers, it would just literally suck the batteries down. And then here, I don't know, maybe a year later, we were out at Boykin Springs in Texas, and which, by the way, ain't even worth going to now because it's all been logged off and clear cut. But at the time, that was a hot place. And here we got out there, and multiple people had video recorders and cameras and good tape decks that all died when we got in there in amongst all the boogers. And
which I did not believe until I went to Boykin Springs. And had it happen to me on that trip.
Yeah, and I still couldn't get my head around that because I had heard other people talk about that, and I had you hear paranormal investigators talk about that, and I'm thinking, these are flesh and blood things, this bullshit, that doesn't happen. But then here I've witnessed it happen multiple times now, and I do not remember the name of the guy. Somebody that we crossed paths with back then had an EMF meter identical to the ones that a lot of the paranormal investigators use now.
I think Dan Ricky had it.
Okay, and they took that EMF meter out with us one night, and when we got close to the boogers, that EMF meter pegged out. I mean, that dude it was just about smoking. And that convinced me that there was something going on. Now, this is something totally 100% different than infrasound. Infrasound is acoustic energy. EMF is electromagnetic force or electromotive force. And I don't know how that relates to sucking batteries down, but something's going on there. And I can't explain. I can't explain the physics behind it.
So from your experience, it's been too many things for it to just be a coincidence.
Yes, it's been too many. I've seen it happen to too many different types of electrical equipment, from analog tape decks to digital tape recorders to video recorders to cameras. I've got a really nice Olympus OM2S program that back in the pre-digital camera days, I used to take it with me, trying to shoot pictures of boogers, and a battery wouldn't last 3 hours in the damn thing in the field, trying to shoot boogers and trying to get pictures of boogers. Whereas my old full manual, my old Olympus OM1, it'd still keep working. Although I was just, guessing what I was doing in the dark, because it hadn't got any kind of electronic display or anything. But, I've just seen it happen too many times to too many different types of equipment, and not, belonging to me as well as to other people in the group.
But there is one thing though we have determined about all that though. And I don't want everybody to take this wrong. If we take a video camera or a recorder or something of that magnitude and leave it in the woods on record and walk off away from it, sometimes these things come up there and start screwing around with it. When they come up there and start screwing around with it, it don't have a problem recording nothing. I'm thinking, and Coonbo is, that when this thing is stressed to the max, I'm talking about with people who are have called them in or they have come in for whatever reason and they have this sort of equipment, I believe it's something physical within the Bigfoot or the booger itself. I'm not talking about it being a power source or anything, but I'm saying there's something going on with stress. And with it being on alert, excited, stressed, whatever you want to call it, because of the given situation, it affects electronics, because if you can leave your same camera, or if you trust to leave your same camera out in the woods unattended while it's still recording, it won't affect it there.
That is correct. And the same thing with audio recorders. You know, we very commonly, I mean, we still, every time we go out, we hide audio recorders out around the camp area, and they run right as long as you expect them to run. And
we've got good recordings doing that. Yeah, we've got good recordings doing that. I mean, we've even had that done last year. You remember Coonbo up there on your place with a good friend of ours, one of our outlaws, Peck. You know, he's known as Bullywogger. And
Bullywogger.
Yeah, he's learned to leave his recorder out away from the camp, and we do have pretty good success at catching these things chattering, talking to themselves, or talking amongst themselves, or you can hear them run right by the damn recorder and everything.
Yeah, we got some real good baby cries there on the farm this last time. We also got what I think may be, if I had some spectrum analysis software, I could find out for sure. We may have one of the first actual recorded incidences of that documented on audio of somebody being zapped, of us, them using infrasound on us. You can hear one sneaking up in a tent that we were three of us were in, and we were in there, shooting the breeze and talking, and then you hear this noise, this low frequency, and it drops real low, and you can hear the microphone start clipping, and about that time you hear my dog Zara starts barking. And
hear him barking at you now.
Yeah, well, he wants out. But Zara starts barking, and then the thing busts out running, and it runs past two of our recorders, which that sounds pretty good. You can hear him go tearing off down back towards the river.
I've got to ask a question from our buddy Aaron. Aaron wants to know, are there certain areas you guys won't go to anymore because you feel there's a particularly nasty, mean-spirited, and quite possibly malevolent booger that resides there, and it's just not a good idea to go visit as long as he's still around?
Hell, that's a challenge to us. We don't know no better, do we?
I don't know about that house. That dadgum place over in north end of Holly Springs that you put me on to. That where we went out there in that graveyard out there, west of Faulkner.
Yep.
Out there in the middle of nowhere. That I would go in there if I had Clint and I went back in there. We couldn't stay in that place. We absolutely could not stay in there. And I would probably, if I had 6 to 8 people, I'd go back in there. But and Bear, I don't know. I wouldn't go back in there by the old bunker area at LBL even with a large group at night.
Yeah, that's true too. I hadn't even thought of that one.
Well, I'll bring up one spot for you guys to talk about. I've never been there, and I won't go there. And that's Brown Springs.
Brown Springs. I will not go to Brown Springs after dark. No.
Hell, I love Brown Springs, but I ain't going there after dark either.
Yeah. And one time in daylight was enough for me.
That's one bad juju in that place. I'm telling you guys, that is one ill-feeling place. And we've been in a lot of ill-feeling places, Coonbo.
Yeah. I might go to Brown. I might go to Brown Springs after dark if there was about a 4-car police escort, and then I was walking right in the middle of a marching band or something, going down in there, and we had all kind of lights. I might go into Brown Springs after dark, but I sure wouldn't go in there on a normal boogering trip. Hell no.
Well, what was it that happened that makes both of you feel that way.
What hasn't happened is the question.
Yeah, there's all kind of people been murdered down in there, and this goes back into the 1800s even. And
satanic rituals there back in the 60s, where a lot of African Americans were killed there. Back during the Wild West, this was a major crossing area across the Red River between Indian Territory, which is now Oklahoma and Texas, and that's where a lot of the bandits would attack settlers. Then you got the Kiowa and the Comanche Indians. They used to use that place as an ambush area. The graveyard on top of the hill there. They've got gravestones of settlers and children and everything. That whole place is nothing but evil. It personifies evil. When I went there with Dr. Charles Hallmark and several others, the group we was in, we split up while we was there because there's so much to see on the riverside. What you got there is this little bitty old one-way road in there, one-way road out, and the cemetery's on top of the hill. And then on the south side, you got to cross a little field, and then you've got about a 40 or 50-yard stretch of hardwoods, trees, which is a low, swampy delta when the Red River comes up. But when the Red River recedes, it's about 4 or 5 feet high in sage grass. And then it peels off into the Red River with quicksand and sandbars and everything else down there. All kind of cottonmouth, water moccasins, copperheads, rattlesnakes in there, wild boar, wild hogs, all kind of stuff in there. But we separated that one day. We was finding numerous tracks on the sandbar, and people was going nuts taking pictures of these big, various different size bear footprints on the sandbars. And me and Dr. Hallmark, we went off in our own little direction and actually got out of sight and out of sound of the rest of the party. And when we got over there to a certain location, something started pacing us through the darn sage grass. And we knew it was pacing us. We could see it occasionally. It was running on all fours, the whole 9 yards. And I would tell Charles all the time, I said, ignore it, because Charles wanted to twist his head around and look at it all the time. I said, if you keep ignoring it, just flash around and take a picture of it, But he just couldn't do that. And there's legend of the Nalusa Thalia in there, which is the man dog or dog man. Not only do they have boogers in there, they have other things in there. They got a lake up there called Leeper Lake. It's spelled Leeper. And Indian legend or Comanche legend has it that there's something that lives in that lake and all kind of good crap up in there. But remember this while I'm telling it. Every bit of that property is private property, and the Oklahoma state government will keep you out of there. You can go up there to the graveyard during the daytime, but there's been so many grave desecrations and everything else up in there that they kind of watch that area all the time under the pretense that they're trying to keep vandals out of there. Actually, I believe they're trying to keep the next victim out of there, if you want the honest to God truth.
I can recount a story I heard firsthand from a group of Texas researchers that went there, and while they were there, I guess it would have been a state park ranger of some kind came in there, and asked what they were doing and wanted to see their IDs and everything. And he asked them, do any of you have any firearms on you or in the vehicles? And they said, no, we don't carry guns with us. And he said, well, you shouldn't be in here without a gun.
I remember that. I remember you telling me about that, and I know who the guys were that went up in there.
Yeah.
But that is one evil place. But also, mad to tell you guys, too, that Borkin Springs ain't nothing to be ashamed of either, is it, Hoss?
Uh-uh.
No, the last time I was there, I swore that was the last time I'd go. And it was the last time I went.
I wouldn't go back around that old sawmill after dark with, just 2 or 3 of us.
No.
It'd have to be.
Well, as the crow flies, Coonbo, when that one swung at me, which I wasn't looking back because I didn't want to see what hit me. As crow flies, we probably wasn't 50 good yards from that sawmill.
I know.
Aaron had another question, and I was kind of interested in hearing you guys' thoughts on this one. In your experience, are female boogers just as territorial as the males, or do they hang back with the young?
They hang back with the young.
Yep. The deal with the female, though, and a lot of people don't realize this, we talk all the time about the alpha male. What we don't talk about is the alpha female. And actually, the alpha female has more authority than the alpha male. And I'll tell you why. The alpha male, all he's good for is eating and breeding.
Yeah, Coonbo already knows the answer to that one.
Well, just like I better not answer.
The alpha female is usually one that is barren. In other words, she cannot produce any more offspring. She takes over and helps raise the very young. She also determines where the troop is going to bed down for the day. She also determines where the troop is going to wander to where they're going for the night. She's the one that controls the hierarchy in the troop itself. She's the one that when the females who's still suckling is very young, slaps the alpha off of him when he gets a little randy, because she's got enough sense to know that she's already got to help raise and train the infant at least for 2.5 years before she will allow the alpha to get to that female again. That's why the numbers are low. If they had a breeding situation just like humans, or if they had a breeding situation just like rabbits, we would be overrun with these things by now. They're smart enough to realize that it takes at least 2.5 years to raise one so it can get around on its own without looking for milk from its mother. She'll help that female as a new mother to keep the other males from messing with her again, even though she still does come into heat or in uterus, just like any other animal does. Yestrus? Yeah, there we go. I knew I was going to throw a barbarism in this damn thing somewhere. I've just tried not to embarrass every woman out there. But,
too late for that.
Yeah, well, hell, there's one barbarism. But you get my point, guys. I mean, the dang alpha female has more authority than the alpha male.
Well, also the alpha female is not always, bearing. I mean, if you've got one that's one that's just established in a new territory, a young male that's just established in a new territory, he'll try to lure a female away from a troop somewhere. And when he's successful with that, and they get out and establish a territory, of course, she's breeding. They're having as many as they can, sort of like us, as many as they can afford to support, till they try to get a little bit of numbers built up. But
when they get the numbers built up, Tim, until they get the numbers built up, she's going to definitely be the alpha. She's the only one.
Yeah, I mean, she's the alpha from the beginning. But yes, after they both get on up in age, and then somebody challenges the male alpha,
right,
for position, and whoops his ass and sends him down the road. She is still left there with all her progeny, and so she's damn sure the alpha then.
Yes, she is.
Because unless I've never heard reports. I've never heard or seen a report of a male beating up on a female. And, I have heard reports of, males fighting and such, but I've never heard reports of females fighting.
Me neither.
Here's another question for you guys. It's from Thane Mathis. That's from Thane Mathis as well. And that is, given what each of you know and have experience with these creatures, what do you believe they are? And it's a two-part question. So, do you believe that they are capable of breeding with human beings based on, some of the old legends?
Well, I think what these things are, and this is just my opinion and mine only. I've worked with a lot of various native tribes, especially when I was in Oklahoma. I always try my best to respectfully learn and get to know more native tribes across the United States. I really do honestly believe these are the ancient ones. They are the chosen ones. They're the ones who came before. And the ones that came before and the ancient ones, in my honest opinion, are the mound builders or the Anasazi. I know that from their actions and their habits and things that these things do are more in line with the native culture. I know they count coup. I know they mimic other animals. I know they leave evidence in forms of tree bows, formations to give directions towards water and food sources. I know they use territorial formations when establishing a territory, creating boundaries. Everything that these things have done mimics native Indian culture. And so there's no doubt in my mind. I asked all the time, the question, which came first, the chicken or the egg? I like saying which came first, Bigfoot, the booger, or a native, or was it vice versa? But I'm honestly believing, due to the descriptions I hear from native culture and tradition, that these things are the ancient ones. They are the ones who came before. And that's how they are basically described in every native culture that I've studied and read about. And in regard to the second part of that question, yes, I believe they can mate with a quote-unquote human and produce offspring. I'm 100% almost sure of that without actually seeing it happen. And I'll tell you why I think this way. A lot of the same natives I've spoken of before tell of these things in this way. They have, of course, there's not going to be documented proof of it. No hospital's going to accept that. No hospital's going to prove documented-wise that this female was sexually assaulted by a Bigfoot. According to a lot of the natives I've met out in Oklahoma, various people have told me that that one, like one instance, one says that one has bobo blood in it. And according to that tradition within that tribe, that's their word. It was called buffalo. It starts Goola or something like that, but the G is silent. And I'm probably even massacring that word. But they claim that one has part of its blood running through its system. And this person has actually been pointed out to me when I was in Oklahoma, and this person is exceptionally hairy. This person is exceptionally taller for that tribe, and his forehead is more protruding or pronounced. And I mean, could it be a cruel joke? Yeah, it's very possible it could be. Does it actually have that kind of blood running through his body? I couldn't actually say. But I do know this: none of these natives people have lied to me yet. and why should they lie to me about that fact?
I believe they absolutely positively can breed with humans. And I think there's a fair to middling chance that they are a branch or possibly even some kind of a remnant of Neanderthals. And I'd say that for the type 1 and type 2 boogers. Or either there's something altogether different. But I think what surprises me is the proportions of the Neanderthal skeletons, the ratios of shoulder to wrist length and shoulder to elbow, elbow to wrist, hip to knee, knee to ankle, and the leg length and the arm length. The ratios are of Neanderthal skeletons are almost dead identical to the ratios of what we see on Sasquatch today.
Right.
And that recreation that you see in the book Them and Us of what they looked like I said, you lose the vertical slit pupils, you get rid of the spears that it's carrying, and you lighten the skin up somewhat, to make the skin lighter colored, more gray colored, or it could even be a different color, and give it a more of a negroid type nose, and you've pretty much got dead on a type 2 booger. The way it's built and everything in the book, the way they've got the body proportions and everything, and the big barrel chest and all that.
Our buddy Kurt Stanley from the wonderful state of Oklahoma had a couple questions. What have your findings been revealing the use of rivers and waterways as migration routes? And do you theorize that these things are using underground dwellings such as riverbanks and caves along these routes?
I agree with it. I agree with it totally.
I do too.
Going back on what I theorized a while ago about natives, and I really think this thing is a native and an Indian, and that was the main source of travel and the main source of boundaries, the main source of extensively moving around throughout the countries way before the coming of the horse was by water. And most natives used the water with canoes and everything, but I also know enough to know that water sustains life, and as long as there's water, a continuous free-flowing fresh water outlet or source, you're going to more than likely have Bigfoot or boogers. I do know they will utilize banks, especially these big banks in these larger creeks and streams and rivers, and what these banks will do, they'll underscore underneath the root system of these big trees, especially in curves and steep banks on river and creek sources. A lot of times, me and Kirk even was discussing this one day. They used to have a show on TV about noodling. I'm sure a lot of people don't know what noodling is. That's when you go underwater and capture a catfish, free-handed without using bait or anything. And a lot of times a beaver or a muskrat or something get up under these multi-root systems up on these deep-cut banks, and they'll carve out caves or little caverns. And I honestly believe that a booger will utilize that and probably elaborate and enlarge it and use the same sort of system. But I also know while they're using that, they're not going to put themselves in a one entrance type situation. I believe they'll have a secondary route out of it. They will never corner themselves.
Well, I know, I'm thinking back in the 1980s, buddy of mine, a place we used to hunt all the time was along down in a creek bottom, and he was driving along. There was an old wagon road kind of a deal, or old field road that ran along the edge of the creek, and the bank was about, I don't know, 6 to 8 feet high down through there, and he was driving along down along the edge of the creek, and all of a sudden the whole big bank area where he was just caved off, and his vehicle ended up out in the dadgum creek. I don't remember if it rolled and ended up upright in the creek, and we had to go down there and pull it out later. But anyway, that area that caved off there was a big cavity up underneath that creek bank, as big as a F-250 long wheelbase truck. And
right, no reason for it to be there either, was it, Tim?
Right, yeah, and that's what really surprised me. You know, at the time, it never dawned on me what it could have been. But we were all, what in the hell would have tunneled out up underneath there? And it wasn't even, this particular place wasn't even really in a curve in the outside of a curve in the creek bank. It was fairly steep there, which made it even more surprising. But
right, no creek system underground either, was it?
No, there was no spring coming out there or anything like that. But out in Oklahoma, I remember finding one up under a bank there. Dan Ricky told me that he thought he'd seen them coming and going up in there, and so I crawled down in the creek bed. We were walking up there, and I found this big dugout area, and my God, you could see the handprints and the finger marks and everything else where they'd been digging.
Yep. And wasn't that off the Washita, Tim?
It was not too close to his. It wasn't very far from Alfalfa, there where he lived.
Right. Well, that the Washita's down into there, and that's where they're seeing a lot of them.
It was actually over there. It was on a creek that feeds into that lake.
Fort Cobb Lake.
Yeah. It was a creek that feeds into the west side of Fort Cobb Lake.
That's over there. What they called the bottoms.
Yep.
That's Cobb Creek.
Yeah,
Cobb Creek. Good old Cobb Creek.
Yep.
Another bad area up in there that we were talking about earlier. We don't want to go to purgatory in the dark either.
No.
Don't want to go to purgatory.
It's called purgatory for a reason.
Yeah.
One more thing before we lose the question about the creeks, and Coonbo will remember this one. Back in the late 60s and the 70s, when a creek would start washing out, this is before OSHA and the EPA got as rough as they really did, and actually it was a wrong method of doing it. To keep erosion down, and I bet you Matt's already thinking ahead because I've told him this one before too. What they would do, they would use old cars and old trucks at 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62 cars or trucks that they'd scrap out of scrap yards. And what they'd do, they'd take these vehicles and throw them into these curves of these creeks to stabilize the banks. Y'all know what I'm talking about.
Oh Lord, yeah, I can show you places where they're stacked 3 and 4 deep.
Yep.
And then 12, 15 long down creek bank. Yeah.
And what has happened back in those days was that was one of the first locations where I took note that there was a booger hanging around there. And then I actually found the old car that he was using. What he had done, he'd crawl in through the window or through the trunk while it was nose down in, and he was pulling all the stuffing that was left out of the upholstery on all these different various vehicles to make him a nest or a bed up under there, and he was using that as a sentinel post. Y'all remember me telling y'all about that one?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'll even expound a little bit further. I mean, we have theorized based on our own findings of tracks and just different sign that they'll use any form of shelter available.
Yes.
I mean, whether it's an old rundown house, barn, car left out in the woods, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they are very opportunistic whenever it comes to shelter.
Old abandoned houses out in the middle of nowhere. You can either ride by them on gravel roads out in the middle of nowhere and see vines and trees growing out windows and through the roof and everything else. But and nobody thinks about even looking in a place like that. But if you just stop, and I'm not giving everybody permission to do it because most of these places are on private property to begin with. But 9 times out of 10, if you go to the backside of that house, once you fight through the jungle to get there, you'll find a certain window or a certain back door or a certain exit port, even if they dug up through the underneath the house and into the house itself. You remember, Tim, up there at LBL, the old house?
Well, look what it did to my old house. You remember when I took y'all down to my old house, was done the same way as that one at LBL, the identical same way. Well, they dug under the foundation and busted up through the floor.
Sure did. And they will bed in the back rooms or in one of those farther reaches with more than one escape avenue. Anything coming down the road in front of it, of course, they'll hear it, and they can actually have a viewpoint all the way out to the main road. I mean, it's not nothing like you're going to slip up on it, you know, by being stealthy. I mean, everything is passing right by this darn old house, and you just don't know what's in that house. And we have found them to utilize these type structures. Every one of us has.
There's a lot of reports out there of people out hunting or something like that, or they're out working and there's an old, you know, a storm or something comes up and there's an old abandoned barn or old hog shed or something like that way back there, you know, in the boonies on the back of a farm, and they'll duck up in there to get out of the rain, and all of a sudden they figure out that they're not in there alone.
Yeah. I've done that a time or two myself, also.
Yeah. But
very opportunistic. Very opportunistic.
All right. Trey from Tennessee. We all know Trey.
Yep.
A new buddy of ours, but one that's definitely growing on us.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. He has a few different questions here, so I'm just going to pick one. What do you think is the average lifespan of a Sasquatch?
No doubt with me, average. Don't even take me literally 35 years. 35 years does not mean that it cannot live to see probably 50 or possibly even 60. But I do not think, due to the stress levels, due to them not living in a controlled environment, there's no way in hell these things can live to be past probably 60. That's my opinion.
My gut feeling is that maybe 40, something like that. I know, and I'm just guessing. There's I don't know if it's the same one, but there's one that's been seen back. It's been seen along the river there near our farm since the late 60s, and up and down, you know, within about a 2-mile stretch of the river. And that dude is still. My brother saw it all here. I don't know, about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So that may not be the same one. That's a long time, you know, from say 68 to 2010, what would that be? That'd be about 43 years, wouldn't it? Yeah, that's probably not the same one. My gut feeling is they live around 40 years, so I doubt if that's the same booger.
Yeah, I don't think the one Patterson and Gimline filmed is still alive. I just tell you the honest to God truth. She probably bit the dust 10, 15, possibly even 20 years ago.
Yeah. Now, but I want to back up to something while I'm talking about the farm. We know that one of the reasons I became decades ago, I'm talking about back in the 70s now, early 80s, I became convinced that they were migrating onto and off of our farm because they would show up in. I would start hearing reports of booger sightings and stuff along this certain creek bottom that passes near our farm, and it would start in September, and then you would hear reports of them, and they'd be getting closer and closer and closer. Then we'd start hearing them, and people would start seeing them occasionally and stuff back there along the Tennessee River, starting in October, and they would hang around till around April, and then they would disappear. But then you'd start getting reports of them back down in that same creek bottom, headed back south. And so I know that I figured out way back yonder that they were staying down in the Bankhead National Forest during the summer, and they would migrate up along the Tennessee River for the fall and winter and in spring.
Now, Tim, what kind of distance is that you're talking about?
Across country, maybe 40 miles.
So quite a ways.
Yeah.
Over
30 to 40 miles. Yeah, did that over yonder. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Skip and a jump. Yeah.
Well, that's something.
Yeah.
That a lot of people. That's a question that always comes up. Do they migrate?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, mine is a totally different situation. The only time they'll leave my property is when hunting season, especially rifle season for white-tailed deer, comes into about mid-November. So what they'll do, they will retreat onto the military reserve that's next to my property. And, that's safe territory for them. In other words, people couldn't go over there and hunt. But then after the guns start shooting around toward the end of January, you give them 2 weeks, by the 1st of February, they're back on my property. So see, if I would roughly consider that they migrate, it was only due to hunting pressure only. Because these things are basically on my property in central Mississippi, basically 9 months out of the year.
Right.
So is that migration, or is that moving to a safe haven for 3 months?
I think it just depends on the situation.
I think it does too, Matt. I really honestly do.
Down there in Sulphur, they don't have a reason to leave.
No, sure don't.
And they're there year round. But then, over there in Texas and certain areas, a group of us kind of figured that, it was a summer winter type thing where they would migrate about 10 miles from one place to the other back and forth. And then Coonbo's kind of talking about the same thing. But I definitely don't think these things are just cutting cross country and going to the Pacific Northwest for the summer or vice versa.
Well, it could be that way. See, now Jonathan can attest to this one better than anybody, and I'll tell you why. We don't have the mountainous regions that Jonathan probably has access to, and I don't know what kind of terrain is around Jonathan. But Jonathan, do they basically hang around up there where you're at more year-round, or is it according to the migration of, say, elk and deer and all who come down from higher elevations during the colder months of the year?
Well, what I've noticed is, with sitting outside, in November of 2012, that's basically when, we were aware that, they were around. It was really active in November, December, all the way through till about, I think it was either early May or mid-May. And then there was almost nothing in 2013 until from May to late August.
Right.
And so the coming year being, 2013 transitioning into 14, yes, August and September was active. October, and then November and December, they were, still around, still lingering around, and all the way through. There was periods of the summer that I wouldn't hear much, and it's not even necessarily that I hear them all the time, but it's usually a couple times a week. There's something that's pretty convincing to me. But there can also be stretches of 2 to 3 months where there's absolutely nothing. And you mentioned something about hunting season. One of the things that I've noticed is when it's deer season, there's for a couple weeks there's just about no activity around us.
Right.
And
right.
The same is true for when there's like a major fish run going through. Things get pretty quiet on my property. I could only speculate that they go to a location where there's a lot of fish remains or where fishing is easier for them.
Right. So what we're talking here basically, and this is just like anything else. When people talk migrations, the first thing that flies into their head, me and Matt have discussed this a million times. They think of the caribou migration in Alaska. They think of all the great migrations in Africa where they go long distances for water and stuff like that. Matt, we're not talking about migrating, crossing the Mississippi River, the Missouri River, the Columbia River, that type migration, are we?
No, I don't think they would endanger themselves or their groups that much to do something like that.
Well, it would be foolish, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Just all around stupidity. And but I'm not taking away from the fact, that's why I asked Jonathan, and Jonathan basically confirmed it. If you live in a mountainous regions, they're naturally going to follow the game down from the higher elevations certain times of the year, and then also during, say, the warmer times of the year, they're going to go back up. Am I wrong with that?
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think with every 1,000 feet in elevation that you gain, I think it's a 3-degree difference on average.
Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of researchers out in the Pacific Northwest and the more mountainous areas have found that they move up and down the mountains with the food sources throughout the year.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Which I guess we can kind of finish up with this question. I'll let you guys go into it as deep as you want. I don't know how much you're comfortable with throwing out there. Ed Anderson writes, would you explain your use of the topo maps, what you're looking for? And he asks, would they work in the Sierras using fresh water in place of lowland swamps? But I'm going to kind of expand it, and would it work across the board, regardless of where you're at?
I'll put it to you this way, and I'll speak first on this, and the reason why I will, because I'm the one that basically showed Matt how to do it. Coonbo already kind of had an inkling of how to do it, but he just responded.
Shit, I didn't have an inkling. I was doing it way before I ever met you, Bear. But,
okay.
But I didn't want to tell you about it.
All right, good. Well, you just told me, Jack. But anyhow, I want to say this before I say anything. We have given so much away that nobody else has ever given in this community, and I'd like to hang on to something. And I want to hang on to that one, because if I give that away, doggone it, we might as well just donate our britches and everything else to everybody else out there. Yeah, you can find boogers with a topo map. Yes, you can find boogers in any location there is. Am I wrong with this, Matt, or is that how you was able to help Jonathan and Sarah?
Well, it worked with them in Washington. It put us on top of one blindly in Texas. And it works like the back of your hand in Oklahoma.
It works for Autumn Williams out there in the Pacific Northwest. It blew her mind when she sent me a topo one time, and she said, Bear, where would you suggest that we start looking? And it wasn't 2 weeks later, she sent me a email and said, you swear to God you've never been in this part of the country in your life. I said, no, I've never been past Oklahoma as far west. And as far north as I've ever been was Michigan. But I've never been out that way in my whole life. I'd love to go out there one day. But she said, well, how in the hell did you pinpoint this? I said, I saw certain features on the map. One thing I will share, and it will help people tremendously. And you got to think like this. They will never skyline themselves. And Matt knows what I mean by this, and so does Coonbo and probably Jonathan. You got to find sections on those topo maps where they will never skyline themselves. That's all I'll give. And then if Coonbo wants to let it out of the bag, he can, but I ain't going to.
those little curvy brown lines on the map mean something.
Yes, they do, guys.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Yeah,
yes,
I got in good with the Navajos, with a group of the Navajos that lived out along the Mohoyan Rim there in Arizona. I worked with one. He was an engineer there with a NASA contractor that we were working with, and they were building some stuff for NASA back in the mid '80s, and I was having to spend weeks on end out at Phoenix, and of course, man, every chance I got, I was out in the boonies, rooting around, and I got to looking. I'd been out there rooting around the Superstition Mountains and stuff, and I decided that wasn't a place I needed to be hanging around too much by myself.
You didn't find the lost gold mine, the lost Dutchman mine?
No, but I walked back in there. I saw that place is weird. I mean, that's one thing. If you watch that show on TV right now, you can see that if you drive around it, it doesn't look near as big as what it is. And when you get there on the ground and start hiking your butt back in there, you start finding all kind of stuff that you didn't realize was there. And,
yeah, that's what I found out about the Wichita Mountains in Oklahoma too. I love it out there, but keep going.
But anyway, I was poking around the Superstition Mountains, and then I decided I didn't want to. I didn't need to be running around back there by myself. And then anyway, I got to looking over around the Mohoyan or Mogoyan or Mogollon. They pronounce it a bunch of different ways. Rim area. And seeing that there was a bunch of cool stuff out there, well, this one particular Navajo that I worked with, he and I got to talking, and I said, I noticed that a lot of that area is in part of the Navajo Nation, and I asked him about going out there, and he said, well, what do you want to go out there for? I was just poking around. I like to go out and explore around some of these creeks and canyons in there. I noticed there's some lakes and things out in there, and I'd like to go, just poking around. And he said, how do you know about that kind of stuff? Well, I whooped out my topo maps one day at lunch and started showing him, and he said, well, where are you interested in going? I started pointing out some places on the map. He says, why do you want to go up there? And I said, well, you ever heard of Sasquatch? And he raised one eyebrow, looked at me, he says, yeah, what about it? And I said, well, I figured that'd be a good place to go poking around. And he said, well, let me tell you about something. And so I started getting stories from him of stuff that went on out in that area. And anyway, I got in good with him. He figured out that, we became pretty good friends, and I started hearing more stories and stuff from him. and it was all because I was able to show him on the maps the places that I was interested in going, and I asked if it was okay to go out there, since it was on the Navajo, in the Navajo area, and
on the res.
Yeah, well, that area right there is not really it's not controlled as tightly as other parts of Arizona.
Right.
Yeah, it's at least it wasn't at the time. It may be now. It may be that I couldn't go back in there like I was in. But like I said, this was in the mid 1980s. But
right.
Anyway, and I looked on before I started poking around when I was working, living in Alamogordo. Before I started poking around in places out in New Mexico, I had my topos out and was, looking at things, and I picked areas to go, and it worked out there just as well as it works at home. And,
well, put it this way: if somebody knows me personally and they can get a hold of me with a PM, I might help them out in their location. But honestly, guys, I don't want to give all that out, because I was told by a major researcher once that there's no way in possible hell that you could ever find a Bigfoot through a topo map. And I just grinned my best shit-eating grin that I could come up with, and I said, you go on and keep believing that crap.
and that's what, and the same guys would tell you that, well, there's no way, you can't call them up like that. That's ridiculous. You can't call them. And
there's no way you can, Coonbo. Why in the hell are you starting that mess?
Right. And Bear and I were using, independently of each other, we're using topo maps and calling, before anybody else was talking about it. Now I know that there's I've heard of some other researchers that were pretty sharp, and they keep a very, very, very low profile, but they're from up in the Carolinas, and I know those old boys were doing it just like Bear and I at about the same time.
Well, there's an old boy in Georgia the same way.
Yep, and these guys from up in the Carolinas, I've never met any of them, but I've read some of their stuff, and I know that they were doing it about the same time that we were figuring it out, and I've learned that since then. I didn't know it at the time. But, I'm not claiming I'm not saying that we're the first guys in the country to do it, but we're probably the first ones that ever talked publicly about being able to, about doing it.
You're right about that. We were the first that start talking publicly. There's a guy out.
You're talking about in the Carolinas, or are any of these people members of the BFRO?
I don't know. I can't remember that much about them right now, but.
I don't
think they were. I don't believe they were.
The ones I know of, we won't have nothing to do with the BFRO, and that's just the way they feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if let's put it this way: if Matt Moneymaker, who is supposedly the founder of the BFRO, knows it, he damn sure ain't using it on finding Bigfoot.
Well, guys, thanks for being on. It's been fun. We're going to go ahead and wrap up with that before we get on that soapbox, because we'll stay there all night. I appreciate you guys being on again, answering some questions from some of the listeners. Thank you to the people that wrote in with questions. Thanks, Jonathan, for being here once again for me.
And, yeah, it was awesome, hearing more stories from Bear and Coonbo. I mean, 2 hours have gone by, and it's almost like I can't get enough of it.
Yeah, and these guys ain't going nowhere, folks. We're going to have them on a lot. I mean, we've been together too long. They're going to be helping us out with the show and stuff in the future, so stay tuned. There's definitely more to come.
I'd like to do this question and answer some more,
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, actually, it gives us a format to keep from repeating the same things over and over. Me and Coonbo talk about this all the time. we've got so much stuff that we've learned either through experience or by accident over the years that we haven't even scratched the surface on, have we, Hoss?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
A lot of people wrote in with multiple questions, lots of questions, and if there's more time, we get to them, but I'll pass the questions on to you guys through email, and if you want to go ahead and take time to answer them or reach out to the people, feel free to do that. Everybody remember to check the links. I want to say thank you to Joe, Guidebook Beats, for our intro music. And don't forget to comment and sub. And thanks again for listening to Bigfoot Crossroads.